Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Bricks and Bleachers podcast. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. Cubs and O's meet this afternoon in the rubber game of a 3-game series. We'll preview that. Trade deadline is passed. Got a recap of Cubs moves, and we'll try to make sense of what to expect in the final third of the season. Plus news and notes from around Major League Baseball. Cubs enter play on Sunday with a record of 64-46. That's the third best record in the majors, but second in the National League Central. A 4-3 loss to the Baltimore Orioles yesterday. Matthew Boyd with a great start, 7 innings, 8 strikeouts, had the lead when he exited, but the bullpen imploded in the 8th. Ryan Brazier to begin the inning, followed by Caleb Thielbar. Gunnar Henderson with a 3-run home run in the 8th, and that was the deciding factor as the O's take it 4-3. Cubs tried to mount a rally in the 9th, but unable to score there. This comes after a 1-0 Cubs win on Friday, a game that was very fast, done well under 2 hours. It was tied for the quickest in the majors this season. So this afternoon's game will decide that series, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. Means the Cubs are now second in the National League Central, falling behind the Brewers this week. Milwaukee has been on a tear the last 5 or 6 weeks. I mean, right after Father's Day, Cubs had, I believe it was a 6 or 6.5 game lead on the Brewers. And now the Brewers are in front, actually a 2-game lead now atop the National League Central. Cubs fell to the Brewers 2 of 3 in Milwaukee this week. And you look at that series, Brewers had the upper hand. They definitely look like the better team of the two. Bit of bad news, though, for the Brewers this week with Jackson Chourio. He has hit the IL with a hamstring strain, and they do not expect him to return anytime soon. And then late this morning, a short time ago, the Brewers have placed Jacob Misiorowski on the IL with a tibia contusion. He is their young, hard-throwing pitcher who ended up making the All-Star game this season after just 5 or 6 career starts. In fact, he was supposed to start this afternoon in D.C. against the Nationals. They have scratched him from that, so that is definitely a surprise. So 2 big names for the Brewers are now on the IL in the span of a few days. Cubs and Brewers have split 8 games against each other so far this year, 4-4 so far, with 5 games in 4 days later this month at Wrigley Field to determine the season series between those 2 teams. Let's talk trade deadline. Cubs with 4 moves, adding 3 pitchers and 1 position player. Surprisingly, Cubs did not add a top-of-the-rotation guy. That is a disappointment. Instead, we're talking about the addition of Michael Soroka from the Washington Nationals. He's 3-8 this year with the Nationals, ERA just under 5. Expected ERA, though, is in the 3s, his FIP just over 4. So perhaps a change of scenery will boost his numbers because he may be a little better than those numbers indicate, although it is striking that he leads the majors with, I believe, 14 batters hit by pitch this season. That is a shockingly high number. Cubs actually targeted him last offseason before he opted to sign with the Nats on a 1-year deal. He was winless last season with the Chicago White Sox after coming up with Atlanta. In fact, 5 years ago today, August 3rd, 2020, Soroka tore an Achilles mid-game, and he did not pitch again until 2023. He was re-injured as he was working his way back. So he missed the rest of 2020, all of 21 and 22. He'll debut with the Cubs on Monday. Cubs also added Andrew Kittredge and Taylor Rogers to the bullpen, and both have already made their Cubs debut this weekend. Kittredge from the O's. He was an all-star with Tampa Bay back in 2021. And Rogers acquired from the Pirates, who traded for him just 1 day prior. He spent the first half of the season with the Reds. He was an all-star with the Twins back in 21. So in the span of a handful of days, you have Taylor Rogers being on the roster of 3 National League Central teams. That is quite rare. Cubs also added Willie Castro, a guy who plays several positions. He's got decent speed, upgraded bat from the Cubs' existing bench options. Cubs were able to hang on to their top prospects throughout this series of moves at the trade deadline. That's always the thing that you fear during trade deadline season is the gross overpay that often happens. Cubs ended up hanging on to pretty much all of their top prospects, and that's good news moving forward, whether those guys are ready to play in 2026 or whether they bundle those guys to make some off-season moves. We'll see. They needed to free up some roster spots, though, with the addition of these 4 guys. So Ryan Presley, Vidal Brujan, and Brooks Kriske have all been released. Also worth noting, Chris Flexen was released midweek last week in an unrelated move. So the Cubs try to make some marginal improvements around the edges instead of going for a big name or two at the trade deadline, in hopes that these marginal improvements around the edges will help bolster the team's drive to the postseason. Also banking on the return of some familiar names, Jamison Tyone, Javier Assad, and Miguel Amaya, all of whom are close to returning. If all goes well, should see all of those guys back with the Major League club in the next couple of weeks. This and That Hour segment with news and notes from around Major League Baseball. Could spend an entire show talking about trade deadline deals, but we won't. A couple of teams that stand out to me, worth noting, the Twins with a big sell-off. 10 trades ahead of the deadline. Padres with a number of acquisitions, too. I think it was up to like 6 or 7, but they were buying, not selling. Buying to hopefully solidify their existing wild card spot at a minimum, or hopefully chase down the Dodgers in the National League West. And the Cincinnati Reds made a couple of moves, too. I would say that is a surprise. They're currently third in the National League Central and just outside of the final wild card spot. Haven't seen the Reds be aggressive or competitive for several years, but they ended up making a couple of moves that could certainly help boost them down the stretch, adding some starting pitching and at third base. Reds currently right behind the Padres for the final wild card spot in the NL. And the league very excited for the Speedway Classic. Braves and Reds at Bristol Motor Speedway last night. More than 85,000 tickets sold. The largest Major League Baseball crowd in modern era. That was the headline coming into the game. Weather did not cooperate. I'm not sure if 85,000 folks ever filled the stands due to the rain last night. The game did eventually start about 3 hours late and then suspended a short time later. I don't even think they finished the first inning, so they will resume this afternoon. I'm sure a lot of tickets sold will not be used, but I would still venture to say this will end up being the largest crowd of the year at a Major League Baseball game. And from Cleveland, Emmanuel Clase this week placed on administrative leave due to a league gambling investigation. He's the second Guardians pitcher placed on leave with this. I'm sure there will be plenty more details to come. Back to the Cubs as they face off with the Orioles this afternoon at Wrigley Field, 2:20 Eastern. Colin Ray and Brandon Young. Ray only made it 4 innings his last time out against the Brewers. 4 runs, 9 hits, not a great showing. Meanwhile, Brandon Young is perhaps coming off his best outing of the year, although he is winless this season with the O's. Had a couple of starts with the big league club in April, went back to the minors. He returned in late June. Still searching for his first win, but his last time out came on Tuesday against Toronto. 6 innings, 6 hits, just 2 runs given up. Cubs lineup this afternoon against the right-handed Rogers. Looks familiar up top, Bush, Tucker, and Suzuki. It is worth noting Tucker and Suzuki both in a weeks-long struggle. Would be nice to see either of them turn that around this afternoon and an opportunity to reset against a young right-handed pitcher. PCA cleaning up, Carson Kelly, then Ian Happ. Willie Castro getting another start for the Cubs. That's the second for him since being acquired. He'll be starting this afternoon at third base, batting 7th. You've got Nico Horner at 8, and Dansby Swanson back in the lineup, batting 9th. He was out yesterday, Swanson was. Rare day off for him. Cubs return to their normal uniforms today, too, after sporting blue tops yesterday, reminiscent of the 80s and 90s look. No names on the back, everyone wearing 23 in memory of the great Ryne Sandberg, who passed away this week. Those blue jerseys to be auctioned off for cancer research. Cubs will be wearing a 23 sleeve patch the rest of the season. Cubs and O's wrap up a 3-game weekend series this afternoon. And then the Cubs welcome the Reds tomorrow night for a 3-game series at Wrigley. A lot of division games just ahead. We've got the Reds, and then after that, the Cubs travel to St. Louis, up to Toronto, and then back home with Pittsburgh and Milwaukee. Share your Cubs thoughts anytime on X, at Breaks Bleachers, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to listen. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. This is the Bricks and Bleachers podcast.